Stay tuned for today's Antidote, brought to you by the Renegade Success Network. Today's Antidote features a healthy dose of thought-provoking insights and information for business owners, entrepreneurs, leaders, and nonprofit professionals. Each day since March of 2020, this program has offered that one thing to help you continue on your own unique pathway to success. And now, Renegades, we bring you Bob Graham and Tom Brush.
Hey, Tom, it's like the time changed and we were a couple days late and it's later than usual.
Or we're just choosing to be renegades and choosing to do it at a different time today.
There you have it. That's an option.
That would make some sense, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. I will tell you this, Tom. It is really good to see you today.
Thanks. I appreciate that. And it is very good to see you as well. As well as to see, and hopefully, I guess we can't see anybody really, but they can hear us and some can see us, whether you're listening to the podcast or watching the broadcast on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. Welcome to today's Antidote, our daily broadcast and podcast, or as Bob likes to say, our daily cast, where
both broad and pod. Our daily cast, both broad and pod.
Sorry, I messed that up. My apologies. I didn't like that idea when Bob shared it. I was like, I don't really understand that. And okay, that is what it is. That's what's real for him. So that's okay. It was just my little piece of feedback, which is what we were talking about this week. And that's what we try to do. Have a conversation around a topic and try to provide some value around that topic. And then at the end, both Bob and I will share our one thing. And we encourage you, if you have comments throughout, to please share them. If you are watching the cast that is broad, if you're watching the cast that is a pod, you may have to just put it in the comments. It's really hard to do that. Sorry.
I thoroughly enjoyed that. That was one of the highlights for me of all the episodes. I wish I could isolate that.
Well, we can, because it does get recorded, so you can go back and isolate it if you choose.
I'm going to go back to that one.
Okay. Anyhow, if you have thoughts, please feel free to share them. And as always, if you have your one thing, you can share that as well. You can share that in the comments, or you can come to our Ring of Renegades Facebook group, where I put a poll up today about feedback.
I love it.
I was thinking about that. I'm like, that's kind of an interesting question. The question is, which provides you with more fear, giving feedback or receiving it? And then there's some other options.
Right.
So I think it's there's some things for you to consider about feedback that we'd love to see how you feel. And maybe if you're comfortable, share why you feel that way. If you are just watching the cast that is pod, actually, if you're just listening to the cast that is pod,
you're so close.
We would encourage you to rate this show. And
5 stars.
As Bob always likes to say, we hope that you would consider giving us 5 stars. If that's not what's real for you, okay. We would just like the rating anyway, so that will help others identify and find this podcast and gain some value from. So
you can also share it.
You may also share.
We would love for you to share it with someone who might need this message today, or someone that you just need to reach out to, a prospect or someone who you're like, I listened to this thing. I watched this thing. I thought it might be of interest to you. I don't know if it'll matter to you or not, but I figured I'd just share it with you.
Might be, I don't know. Maybe you don't want to do this, to share it with someone who is giving you feedback, or you have to give feedback to, as a way for them to better understand how feedback works. Be a good week to share. I don't know. Maybe that's not a good idea. Anyhow, one of the things that we do.
Uh-oh, you're freezing on me.
Oh, no. I was afraid this might happen later in the day, having issues. Am I back in yet?
You're in and out. You're freezing and unfreezing. So if you go into freeze mode, I will just talk to myself, which I do anyway. So it'll just be the world listening to me talk to myself.
Okay. Well, anyhow, the thing that we love starting the show off with is, if you're a regular listener or watcher, you would know, is we do celebrations. What we have found is, working with our clients, that it is hard for people to find ways to celebrate the actions that they take, not necessarily the results. And if you wonder why we celebrate the actions, you might want to go back a few episodes where we talk a little bit about that. And that might provide some clarity around why we find celebrating actions so valuable. So we start our every show with that. So Bob, what are you celebrating today?
I am celebrating the incredible medical care that is right down the street from me and really valuable sometimes when you don't expect it.
Excellent. I like that. Good. Having good medical care is a thing to celebrate. There is no doubt about that.
How about you?
I am celebrating that, I think I shared this the other day that I got some feedback, and I got more feedback yesterday about some work that I did, and that people appreciate what it is. And I think people's willingness to share feedback, and even if it had been, and I'm probably going to get some from someone else later today about an event this weekend, that might not be as positive feedback. And again, I've just tried to really take feedback as input that I get to allow to figure out how it impacts what's real for me, and that not the positive isn't right and the negative isn't wrong or right. It's just what's real for those people who share it. So I think that's a part of it. So the fact that people are willing to share it with me, I think helps me figure out how to learn and grow.
It's also what's real for them in the moment.
Correct.
Because sometimes, like, I've been to movies before, and at the end of the movie, it's like, I don't really get that. And then the next day I'm thinking about it, I'm like, wait a second. It makes sense to me now. And I think sometimes time gives us more perspective.
Sure. Absolutely. Different perspective, right?
Right.
Because other things come in where we're like,
we have more opportunities to connect what we like with the movie. You get to connect it with, well, this was kind of this, or maybe it was this. Sometimes I leave the theater completely befuddled. And then it's the next day or a week later when I'm like, oh, that's the point. Or I read a review after I've seen the movie, and the review says, here's what the big thing is. And it's like, oh, yes, now I get it.
It's interesting. When I was right out of college, I lived with a guy who was a real movie person. And so we would go a couple of times, and he was all about getting the movie. And it was more than just like the theme and the plot and all that. He was really into it. And I was like, I go to movies as like, okay, this is my 2.5 hour escape that I'll just watch, and it either entertains me or it doesn't. And okay, whatever. It was a chance for me to just take my thoughts away from where I was, go somewhere else, live through that experience, and then figure out how to move forward. So it's interesting.
Yeah, I'm a get the movie kind of guy.
Yeah, I can see that.
I
can understand that.
Same thing reading a novel. If I read a good novel, at the end, I want to understand how they were able to wind me through that pathway, because it's fascinating to me. Now, some people do it read just for enjoyment, watch movies just for enjoyment. I totally get that. That's fine. I like to think of the inner game.
Do you provide
just like
feedback
you look
to the
at
author?
the inner game of lacrosse?
Sure.
And you see it much more strategically than I do. I follow the ball. I see the players. You'd be like, well, the backside official is, 4 degrees to the left of where he should be, and he's not going to be able to see the right angle going at the goal.
Possibly. Or I'm just watching and being like, oh, this is a good game of lacrosse.
And then we have a national celebration.
What is our national celebration today?
You're either going to love it or hate it. This is one of those polarizing ones.
Okay. Are you
Do
making
you
a
like
judgment?
Scrapple? Because it's National Scrapple Day.
Scrapple Day. Interesting. I'm not sure that I've ever really had Scrapple. I mean, I understand it. It sounds like just everything that was left over once somebody put it together and put it on a grill, and there you go.
I was blessed at one point in my life. I lived in a house with an older woman who had someone who prepared meals for her. And part of my rent, my $15 a week rent, was breakfast every day. And Kathleen, the cook and person who managed the house, found out one day that I liked Scrapple. And for about 7 months when I lived there, Scrapple was on my plate every morning. And she was trying to fatten me up at that time. So it wasn't one piece of Scrapple. It was like 3.
She clearly didn't do a very good job, did she?
She did not, but not for not trying. She would make leftover dinner for me and leave me a plate of dinner. I worked for a newspaper and I had night meetings, and I'd come in at 9 p.m. and there'd be a note, Bob, I left you some food. Just put it, it's cold. She would always have cold food for me, and I would eat it. She was so good to me.
Nice. So
Yeah.
National Scrapple Day.
$15 a week. The best housing rate I've ever seen.
Just maybe shows how old you are.
Fair.
Anyhow, all right. Well, thanks for those celebrations. And if you have something you'd like to celebrate, please feel free to share it in the comments. And we would encourage you to think about that every day. It's one of the key elements of our day pack is understanding what are you celebrating? Because the things that you do are hard. Not easy to always accomplish what we want. And we don't always get the results that we are hoping for. Yet, if we start to celebrate the actions we take, then we can find ways to continue to move forward. And if you are struggling with that now, we have our 6-week program. Be a great time for you to get started with it now. Finish it before year end so that when you kick off 2022, you are ready to hit the ground running and very focused on how you're going to achieve the things you want to achieve, take the actions that you need to take, and learn from the results that you get. So if you'd like to learn more about that, just go to renegadesuccessnetwork.com and go to programs and then search for Find Success, the Renegade Way. It'll be a link. Go there and it'll give you all the details. You can also message Bob or me, and
Bob or me,
and we will be able to provide you with further information. We have a group of people going through it now, seeing some great success, and we would love to help you find your success. So let's dive into our conversation. We were talking about feedback yesterday, and we were talking about when it's real. And today we're going to talk about inviting it. And I think that that's a key component of the process of feedback. And I have some thoughts on that, but I'd love to hear what you're thinking, Bob. So why don't you share some thoughts?
Okay. One of the big buzzwords that we hear all the time over the last 10, 15 years was collaboration. Mm-hmm. And collaboration really is inviting feedback because it's sharing ideas, it's putting things out there, and other people commenting or going, hey, you know what, Tom, that's a really good idea. What if we shifted it 2 degrees this way? Or what if we took that and married it to this thing I'm thinking about? And I've done some workshops with companies and organizations on the whole idea of collaboration and innovation. And the feedback is the key thing. If you're in a meeting and you're brainstorming and someone comes up with a completely crazy idea and you go, that's the craziest thing in the world, or the CEO isn't going to accept that, or we can't afford that. That's feedback that's going to stop things. That doesn't invite feedback. But and what I've learned is when someone says something that's crazy, my first comment to them is, tell me more. And I have learned that most of the great ideas that come out of brainstorming sessions, or everyone goes to lunch one day or something else, it's usually something that's really initially far-fetched. And someone or a group of people grab hold of it and they start to play with it. They accept feedback from each other. I was at a lunch with some IT people at a job I had years ago, and we were having lunch, and I said to them, it'd be really great if we could do this thing. It would save so much time. And they're like, yeah, no way. 2 days later, one of the guys came to me with a sheet of paper. He had mapped it out. Little blocks, do this, do this, do this. If we could get these things in line. I'm like, this is awesome. Let me add this to it. And this might not work. Let me shift it. And we played around with it. And then we went to the board and said, hey, this is a crazy idea, but we think it's got merit. We've talked through it. We've gotten the feedback. We went around and talked to all the units, and they were like, that's a great idea. Not only did the board accept the idea, they said, Bob, this is your project. And as I built that project out, I was getting feedback all the way through it and inviting it, just saying to people, I would go into unit meetings and just say, hey, so this is where we are in the process. This is what we're thinking your role would be. Can you fit that in? And what we learned was some of the things that the IT guys and I thought that people would or could or might do were not valid. And it sent us back to the drawing board a couple of times, like, okay, we need a technology solution. Our goal at the beginning was we need to make it so that people have less intervention in this process. That was our underlying goal. So when people said, actually, that's going to make it harder, we didn't just go, oh, well, that's the way it is. We'd be like, okay, back to the drawing board. So over 6 months, that process iterated over and over and over because of the feedback. And when it was finished, everyone was bought into it because they'd had a say and they knew their feedback had been incorporated. Not that we did everything that everyone said, but everyone felt, I wanted a little award for it because I led this thing and everyone was like, he should be the employee because he did this great thing. Everyone knew and it's so beautiful and blah, blah, blah. All I did was invite feedback at every iteration instead of just going, this is what we're going to do, like it or lump it. And I think when we invite feedback, it leads to better solutions, more effective solutions. And especially when we talk to our customer or our team or whoever we're working to serve, we get better results when we ask their feedback earlier in the process.
Sure. Well, it's interesting. I think that it's funny because I keep thinking about the word better, and I think we get different results. And
Okay.
typically, and not that, and they could be better.
Mm-hmm.
They could be different. I think also sometimes when you take all of that feedback, you sometimes can head down a path that you think is different, maybe think is better, and you find you've gone all that way and that the feedback wasn't as clear as you thought. Okay, now you've learned.
Or the action step because of the feedback wasn't.
Correct.
Right?
And
it
so
it could be either one, right?
Absolutely. And you're always adjusting based on that. And I think that to me is again, as I try to think about it, is not as that it's going to make it better. It's going to make it different, which is going to lead to different results, which is going to help you better understand what's happening. So that if you need to, you can modify again and continue to make results. Because the way I've thought about it, and there's this interesting, it happens, I think, in some organizations, and I remember when I had some new employees who would always say, I'd really like some feedback. This is something I've been working on. This is something I've been struggling with. So I would welcome your feedback on it. And to me, that's really inviting feedback. And I think it's a great way to establish some boundaries within teams or within groups or even supervisory roles. And also being clear on what are the other boundaries surrounding that. One of the things I think is hard is when are we giving feedback to people? And I think I told you this story, but I don't think I told it on the air. So one of my roles was I was overseeing media relations at a Division I athletic program. And we had the media relations team spent countless hours putting these media guides together. And a media guide is just something that provides all the information you could honestly ever want to know about a team. So when you're talking about football, you're talking about every player, every coach, the record of every team that's ever. Literally, if you want to know anything about it, you open that book up and you can find it. So it was hours and hours and hours of preparation, editing, moving forward. Well, they came up with a rule. Their rule was there's a 24-hour rule because they would be printed and you'd look at the printing was beautiful. And in the past, some people would look at it and within guaranteed a half an hour or 45 minutes, they find a mistake. And the last thing that they wanted, and maybe we shared this when you were talking about speaking, that the last thing they wanted to hear was, you've done all this work and the only thing I can say is, hey, I found this mistake on page 57 in the bottom paragraph where it says, that instead of the. And, I think so while they always invited feedback, they would share and they said, I'd love to get your feedback. I think there's also an understanding of when someone invites us, being clear on what does that invitation really look like? And, it's not just an invitation to now beat us up or to overly praise. It's more like, okay, how can we provide feedback that allows them to grow from it? And just because somebody gives you feedback doesn't mean that that's going to make the action any better. This might be different. The other example, I think this is a really interesting thing within the college, especially lacrosse community, if officials, women's officials, is a lot of times if you're a newer official, you'll go to a game, and at the start of the game, you do this pregame, and one of the things you share is, this is one of the things that I'm working on. This positioning, this call, this thing that I've sort of struggled with, and I'm trying to get better at it. So, if you see something, I really welcome your feedback. And I think this goes a little bit to about better, is that because you're getting one person's perspective based on one situation, you might have just been off that day and not doing what you normally would have done, or because the way the team was playing or the other officials were working, they offer you one set of feedback. You asked for it, they were willing to share. And then you go and do that at another game and they give you different feedback. And so it's an opportunity for you to take all of that in and say, okay, as I incorporate all of this, how do I figure out what's real for me? And so that I've offered and invited people to provide feedback so that I can then get lots of perspectives, lots of people with with different knowledge or experience to help me impact what's real for me.
And it does. And inviting feedback to me doesn't mean that you have to incorporate everyone's feedback.
Correct.
Nor do you have to knee-jerk. I can remember when I would build websites for companies, and it was change, and people don't like change. So someone would go to the website and go, I hate your new website. And the owner would be like, all right, put it back to the old one. I'm like, give it 3 weeks. 3 weeks later, no one said a word. Right. Not a word. Sure. It was just that initial change. Wait, this button was always here and now it's not here. I always click on this and now it's not doing what I want it to do. Okay. Change is hard. And I think the other thing about inviting feedback is how you receive it.
Of course.
If you open your arms and say, please share with me, Tom, what I did well in this broadcast or not. And when you go, hey, Bob, so what about this thing? You do this thing and it really is distracting. Tell me more, Tom, versus, Tom, that's just the way I roll. Get over it.
Sure.
And I've had bosses and colleagues and customers that deliver feedback that way, or they've responded to my feedback with, well, that's not going to change. That's not negotiable. It's like, okay, now I'm going to be more cautious the next time I provide them feedback. I'm not saying my feedback is the be all and end all.
Sure.
But if to invite it is to encourage it, and to encourage it is to welcome it in a way that says, I appreciate you sharing that with me. I mean,
Sure.
That can be the nicest thing to say, even if inside you want to throttle the person. Guess what?
Well, then are you really looking for feedback? Or you just want something to confirm your belief that you did an awesome job? I think that is and I think we'll talk more about that over the next 2 days when we talk about giving and receiving feedback, that I think there is a mindset that you have to approach all of it with. And, I think that, and I don't want to dive into this too much because I think we'll do it a lot tomorrow, but I think.
Why don't you tell us about this private group instead, Tom? I know you like to talk about that.
Well, I will just briefly share that one of the key components of our 6-week program is a way to look at yourself and get some of your own feedback, or maybe get feedback from others. That is not judgmental, or not that I think is helpful.
So I was going to say not as threatening.
Correct. Or like inconsequential.
Yes.
Somebody just, it was awesome. Okay, thanks. I appreciate that. That's great. What was awesome about it? So we'll get into more of that, I think, in the next 2 days. So that's something for you all to look forward to. So you need to come back and join us.
Woo, woo. Come back, baby.
So what is your one thing today, Bob, around inviting feedback?
I think my one thing, I didn't think about it, so I'm doing it on the fly here. And someone asked me at breakfast, Tom, what we were going to talk about today. And he's like, do you know? And I'm like, I really don't think about it a lot until like 3 minutes before the program. And he was very surprised by that. It's like, oh, wow, I thought you guys thought about it a lot. Maybe Tom, not me. So anyway, getting back to feedback and inviting it, I think it's the attitude that we have when we receive it that ultimately does or does not encourage or invite it.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
A little bit. I'm not 100% clear on it.
So if we are, oh, thank you for sharing that. Even if you disagree, you're going to get more of it than, oh, we looked at that 2 years ago. I was working with a client a couple of years ago, and everything was 2 years ago. We looked at it 2 years ago. We looked at it 2 years ago. We looked at it 2 years ago. It's like, you must have had a really busy year.
Correct. What have you done the last 2 years?
That was a year where we really refined a lot of things. And it's like, okay, but that was 2 years ago. And they would not budge from that 2 years ago because they had spent months by their accounting on the process, and it was impeccable based on that. So what did I do as a person giving feedback? They weren't inviting it. I stopped really giving them anything more than vanilla. Like, yeah, okay, sure, that's fine. Yeah, love it. Beautiful. Keep going. And that's what we all do.
Yes. And I think that's part of my one thing is that if you are going to invite it, be open to whatever it will be. Because it's not always just going to be a confirmation of how well you did it or a challenge of how you didn't do it as well. You could have done it differently. I think that's where we just need to be open to receive whatever it is. And then we, as you mentioned earlier, have the choice to determine how much is that going to impact what's real for us. You know, and depends on who gives it, how they give it. All of those things will likely decide how much it impacts who and what we are. The value is that the more we gain, the more information, the more feedback we gather, the more things we have to consider as we think about our knowledge, experience, and perspective and how they change based on all the input that we get from it. So I think if you are willing,
that to me is where the opportunity lies, right?
Of course. If you're willing to, if you're going to invite it, you have to be open that it could be not exactly what you were expected in a lot of different ways. And I think that's when you allow yourself to be open to growth, not just to be looking for confirmation. So that's my one thing.
I like it.
Thanks. All right, everyone. So thanks so much for joining us today. If you have one thing you'd like to share, please feel free to put it in the comments. You can also come to our Ring of Renegades Facebook group, as I mentioned earlier in the show. It's easy to do. Just go to Facebook, search for Ring of Renegades, and all you have to do is ask to join because it is a private group. Create space where we can have conversations about here's some challenges that I had around feedback. Or, man, that's something that, I'll be interested to see the results of this poll to see where people find their biggest challenge. Is it giving it, receiving it, or maybe they feel like they're in a good place on how they deal with feedback on a daily basis. So we hope that we will see you inside our Ring of Renegades Facebook group, or we'll see you tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. Eastern time.
I think so.
Awesome. That's the plan.
I thought so today, though. So
that is our plan. We might get feedback that changes that. That's the beauty of being a renegade and choosing our own unique pathway to success. So we hope that we will see you tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. Eastern time, for our next edition of Today's Antidote. Have a great day, everyone.
Hey, embrace the renegading you. And since it's lunchtime, go get some lunch. You look hungry.
What if they're watching the recording and this is like 6 o'clock at night?
Go get dinner. Go get a snack. Try the gluten-free Oreos. They are better than regular Oreos.
Interesting recommendation. Good feedback on the Oreos.
Oreos, not
Oreos. Not the baseball team that could get a lot of feedback.
Or the bird.
Correct. All right, everyone. Have a great rest of the day. We'll see you soon. Did you say it already?
I did. I said embrace the renegading you.
Oh, that's right. They said go get some lunch. Sorry. My mistake. Here we go. Thanks for listening to Today's Antidote, powered by the Renegade Success Network. The Renegade Success Network helps you confidently create your own unique pathway to success. To To learn more about the Renegade Success Network and how you can take your next step, follow us on Twitter, connect on LinkedIn, or join the Ring of Renegades Facebook group. For full details on how you can join our community, go to renegadesuccessnetwork.com. Embrace the renegade in you.